So, a little background here. My father was in the army for 21 years, retired, and moved to a very small town in central Florida. He got bored after a couple of years, and even though we didn't need the money between his retirement and what my mum was making as a bookkeeper and tax prep, he wanted to go back to work. He started working at various gas stations, and it being a small town, the owners wouldn't care if I came there and helped him out with stocking the coolers or even running the register, as long as I didn't sell any beer or smokes. This all took place in the late 80s and early 90s. The actual story I'm going to tell took place in 1990, and I remember the date well because it was shortly after my birthday, and being 15 in Florida, I had just gotten my learner's permit, and my dad would let me drive him to and from work, just to get some experience on the road, both at day and at night. I was sitting in my usual spot at a table that was set up along the windows, book in hand, feet propped up, and a Mountain Dew on the table along with some snacks. I would generally spend most of the evening that way, reading books, getting up to run the register, and stock the cooler at different times. I remember glancing up because something caught my attention that was unusual, and I realized that a lady was walking up our parking lot from the direction of the interstate. The gas station was right on I-75. This in itself was really strange, because where we were located, you didn't get many people walking, and definitely not walking from the direction of the interstate. I figured she had broken down somewhere and was coming to use the phone to call for a tow truck or something. I was completely wrong. She came into the store, looked around for a few minutes, and I remember getting a strange and creepy feeling about her. She walked up to the counter and started telling my dad a story about how she had gotten stranded and needed a ride to the next big town up north from us. Ocala was the town. My dad let her know that he was working, and there was no way that he could take her. She turned and looked at me, and whilst she was looking away from him, my dad caught my eye and subtly shook his head no. I was confused for a second, but then she turned back to my dad and pointed at me, asking if I could take her. My dad responded back that I only had a learner's permit and wouldn't be able to drive her anywhere and then drive back. Normally, I would have done it, even though it was illegal, because I'd done it a few times before already. I didn't argue with my dad, since this was completely out of character for him. He was normally chatty with the customers, but for whatever reason, he was almost curt and dismissive of her. Turns out, he had a bad vibe about her from the minute he had seen her walking up the drive. Well, she cussed him for a minute, and he basically told her to get out of the store. She slammed the door closed. I thought the glass was going to break from how hard she had slammed it, and then she stalked out of the store and down the driveway. I kept an eye on her and continued to watch as she made her way back up to the interstate and then started up the northbound on ramp. Almost a year later, and I was in my bedroom, less than a week before my 16th birthday, I heard my dad yelling from the living room.
"Son, get your ass in here and look at this."
I quickly ran to the living room and saw my dad pointing at the TV and looked at the mugshot of the lady up on the screen, and immediately remembered the lady who had been in the store. It turns out I almost gave a car ride to Eileen Wernos, who was later convicted of being a serial murderer and then later put to death. I still have nightmares about what could have happened. This happened many years ago, I think around 2009 or 2010. One summer evening, I hung out with my girlfriend for the day at her house. I ended up leaving at around 10 or 11 PM, so it was quite dark out. Before I drove off though, my girlfriend hung out with me in my car for a few minutes. Now my car was an early 90s Dodge or Pontiac sedan. It did not have automatic locks. When my girlfriend stepped out of my car, she did not lock the door again. I drove off, and instead of taking the back road home like I usually did, I decided to take the main road. Since it was late, there weren't many cars out. However, there was a lady standing next to a bus stop. She was pacing around in a circle. I got the sense that she was anxious or nervous about something. When she saw my car, she flagged me down. I pulled over and reached over to roll down the window. No automatic windows either. That's when I noticed the door wasn't locked, and before I could do anything, the lady opened up the passenger door and took a seat. I was surprised by this, but didn't feel like this lady was a threat. She was white, had blonde hair, and was probably in her late 30s or early 40s. I asked her if she was okay or if she needed help. She told me that she was just trying to get home, but her phone died, so she couldn't get a hold of anyone. She also said she had missed the last bus. This sounded plausible to me, and since she didn't seem threatening, and she was already in my car, I offered to drive her home. I started driving up the main road and asked her for directions to her place. We drove for maybe 2 minutes when she told me to turn into a residential neighborhood. As we were driving through here, she started talking to me non-stop. "Thank you so much for stopping. Not everyone is as nice as you. You're real cute, you know that? Your car is super awesome too." I replied with a weak, yeah, thanks. She went on. "It's so nice to find someone who's so trusting this late at night. I like trusting people." At that point, we came to a stop sign, so I looked left and then right. When I turned to the right, she gave me a creepy smile, like an ear-to-ear Joker type smile. I also noticed, for the first time, that her pupils were very dilated and darting around all over the place. By now, I finally began to realize that picking up a strange woman late at night, who may be on drugs, perhaps was not the best idea. I started to think of ways to get her out of the car, but I also didn't want to be rude. I know, I was young and dumb. Before I could think of anything though, she asked me for my phone so she could give her friend a call and let them know that she was coming home. I sheepishly lied to her and said I did not have a phone. I was then struck with a feeling of dread because my phone's ringer was set to loud and any notification or message would reveal my lie. Just my luck, a moment later, someone sent me a text and my phone went off. "I thought you didn't have a phone." "Oh, I forgot that I had it. I thought I left it at home." I don't appreciate being lied to. She trailed off, as if she had more to say. I started to get really nervous at this point. We were deep into this neighborhood, but it was really dark. I needed to get this lady out now. She then pointed up the road and told me to take a right at the next stop sign. The road curved a bit, so from where I was, I could see that there was a dead-end sign. For whatever reason, the thought of turning onto this dead-end street terrified me. I then had an idea. Right before we got to the stop sign, I pulled over and told the lady that my car was making a funny noise and the temperature gauge was slowly going up. I turned off my car and popped my trunk. I told her I was grabbing a flashlight from the trunk, and if she could step out and hold the light for me while I looked at the engine. I got out of the car, I looked back at her, and she looked both mad and annoyed, but she also stepped out. I went to my trunk and rummaged through the things I had there for a few seconds. My flashlight was right in front of me, but I needed to be sure that she was standing in front of the car. Once she was there, I closed my trunk and started walking to the front of the car with my flashlight. My heart was pounding, but I knew I had to keep my voice steady. I gave her the flashlight and then said something like, "Oh, I forgot to pop open the hood. 1 second. I got back into my car and I popped my hood. At the same time though, I turned the car back on and threw it into reverse. The lady just stood there, staring at me. Once I had enough distance, I put the car back in drive and drove straight past her. She was standing near a streetlight, so I got one last good look at her. I noticed she was holding a knife of some sorts in her hand. A large man then stepped out of the shadows and stood next to her. At first, I thought she might be getting attacked, but then they walked away together. I know that this was 100% my fault. It was stupid of me to let her get in my car, and even stupider for me to agree to drive her home. I don't know why she didn't try to attack me earlier. I don't know if they were looking to simply carjack me, or do something else. Before I continue with the final story, if you've enjoyed this video so far, please leave a like, a comment, and subscribe to see future content from me, as well as help me in the algorithm. Thank you. I'm a long-haul truck driver, so I'm no stranger to the States, and I've seen things that I can't explain. But this is by far the weirdest thing to ever happen to me. I was driving through Arizona, heading westbound, on I-40. I had finally hit Flagstaff, and got out at a truck stop and handled my business. As I left from Flagstaff, I ran by a mile marker 185. It's about 10 miles from Flagstaff, Arizona. As I passed mile marker 185, there was what seemed to be a person hitchhiking. The only problem was this guy was huge, like 8 feet tall, looking straight into the passenger window of my semi-truck. On top of that, he seemed to be as wide as the truck from shoulder to shoulder. I passed the hitchhiker at 70 miles per hour, or so I thought. About half a mile down the road, I saw the exact same person, or thing. Once again, I passed it, yet still. This kept happening even 20 miles down the road, to mile marker 165. I saw it every few miles. After I passed mile marker 165, I didn't see it anymore, so I thought I was done with it. But I was dead wrong. I got down to mile marker 145 and had to take a leak, so I pulled over to the side of the road to handle my business. I was about halfway done when I heard an ear-piercing scream, mixed with what sounded like a deer and a human. As soon as I heard it, I started looking around, and just outside the halo of my headlights, I saw it. I have never been more confused and scared in my life. I tried to figure out what it was when I heard something flying through the air. Suddenly, I heard a thump, and sitting 3 feet away from me was a huge rock the size of a basketball. It had to have been at least 80 pounds. When I saw that, I pretty much noped the hell out of there. That thing threw it at me, and it landed 3 feet away. I wasted no time trying to hop back into the truck and get away from whatever that thing was. As I passed it, it just stared me down, and I never saw it again. Can someone please tell me what I saw?